The last several years, the stock market has been driven by the so-called FANG stocks. Are you concerned about the only a few stocks driving the markets and the risk that comes with that? That's going to be our topic on today's episode of Friends Talk Financial Planning. Hi, I'm John Scheer, and I run a fee-only financial planning practice in Middleton, Wisconsin.
And I'm Bridget Sullivan-Mermel, and I've got a fee-only financial planning practice in Chicago, Illinois. And before we start talking about FANG stocks and market concentration, please subscribe. It helps us find more people and connect with more people. So, John, the FANG stocks, let's go over them first.
FANG, right? Gotta have an acronym for everything, right?
Yeah. We've got Facebook, Apple, Amazon, Netflix, Google.
And Google, right?
Yeah, not included, but high market concentration are, for instance, Microsoft, which is number two, but they didn't make FANG. Maybe it's because
it's not, M doesn't fit in that nice acronym very well. I think that's the problem with that.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know.
I don't know if you get many questions, but we'll get folks that talk about that periodically. It comes up in the press and like, hey, these are the things that are driving the market. When these stocks go up, the market goes way up. And there's been some evidence that, hey, the last 5 or 7 years, we've had some pretty good market returns overall. And but if you take out those stocks, the market hasn't been doing very much, right? And so and they're a big portion of the whole S&P 500, the whole market in general, right?
They're over 20%. The top 10 stocks are over 20% of the value of the entire market. So that's a lot of market concentration, and people, I think, maybe justifiably think that seems like a lot,
Right. I've been seeing some of these things, and so one of the things that I think about when I get these sort of questions, I'll be interested to hear your take on it. But I'll bring up a graphic here that shows some of the historical things, and you're exactly right. You can see on the right hand side of the graph here, right? It says at the very bottom, that gray bar, 21, almost 22% of the market, and this isn't just FANG stock, but this is the top 10 stocks in the U.S. market, right? So 20% of 20+% of the market is just in those 10 stocks. Right. And you go like, golly, that means the other, out of the S&P 500, the other 490 stocks are 80% of the market, and a 10 or 20% sort of thing. And it's go.
Oh, these are all tech stocks. I'm nervous. That makes me nervous. Or there's so many of these that are tech stocks. That's unusual.
Yeah. Well, so let's take a look at this. So the one thing my eye gets drawn to that bottom gray bar that says, well, of the top 10 stocks by market cap, what percentage of the market? Of course, 22% these days. That's higher than it was 10 years ago and higher than it was 20. But then take a look back to 1970, right? So, I mean, and granted, it's a long time ago. 50 years ago, though, it's at the same level. 60 years ago, it was 50% more than that. Look at those numbers back in the 30s, 40s, 50s, right? Where right now it feels like, and some of the messaging that I hear or I see out there is, FANG stocks and concentration of the market, unprecedented. And this is unprecedented. We've had this concentration of stocks, of value in these stocks, except for all the other times that it happened, right? But nobody talks about that stuff from the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s. Like, oh no, we've been here before. Even 20 years ago, it was just about at the same level. And again, and for me anyway, I'm not saying don't be worried about it, but it's not, we've never seen this before. It's like, okay, it's part of the cycles. And for me anyway, it's helpful to think this is not new territory, that we've been here before, that we can see some of these. It gives me some confidence that, okay, wait a minute, this is not uncharted territory. And I think that can be helpful to think about.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely correct. The other thing is that, let's go back to 1970. Okay, seems like the Stone Age, right?
That's right.
From now, okay, we got AT&T, and wait, that's not one. What's number one? IBM. What's IBM? It's a tech stock. Yeah. In 1970. So this
isn't that crazy?
This is probably before you were even born, John, but 1970 is not associated with a computer boom. It is associated, maybe, what were they doing in 1970? Starting to get payroll on computers, probably, like the very, very basic. This is so long ago with computers. So So, and it's interesting. Another thing, another stock I find interesting, and we'll put this stock in the show note, or this graphic, which we got from Dimensional Funds, by the way, in the show notes, just in case you're interested. But another one I found really interesting to track was Exxon. So Exxon, I still associate it with, geez, it's a big company, but geez, it's not one of the FANGs. It's not even isn't it? Exxon has dropped off.
Yeah, isn't that interesting?
Isn't that? Yeah. Yeah. So it's like Exxon, which geez, used to be a top, now isn't even a player. IBM is still around, obviously, and it was still in through 2010, but it's not one of the tech stocks that are in the top. It's still around, still actually maybe doing well, I don't know, but it's not one of the top tech stocks anymore. So it's interesting, because I think when you look at this perspective, it's just harder to get a larger perspective on the stock market, yet it is there. The data is there. This is kind of like baseball. It's like the data goes way back.
Yeah, yeah.
So the data is there, but it's like we get so focused on what's going on right now, what's important to me, what do I relate to, that we don't see the bigger picture.
One of the things, and I think that's such a great point on there, Bridget. And one of the things that I always think about when this question comes up, or I see these, and you go, okay, here's this thing, and the first thing I think of is the question: well, is that perception accurate? Right? Of course, the facts are sort of what the facts are, but then looking at that bigger picture on facts for me is, okay, what is it? Sometimes the feelings can be very different than the reality, and I wanted to pull up something, and I hear it from clients too, is, well, geez, it's all these tech stocks, and when tech goes down, we're going to be in real trouble. And let's take a look at where we are here, 2020, on that concentration of stocks. We've got Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, Google, pretty tech heavy stuff, right? Facebook in there, but then the other of the top stocks, look at the other ones that are in the top: Berkshire Hathaway, JP Morgan. Those aren't tech companies. Johnson and Johnson. Right. Talk about, consumer staples like old school. Walmart, again, not a tech. Visa. Right. And so it's just interesting for me to think about my feeling when you said, and I hear people, hey, it's so tech heavy. And I go, yeah, I accept that. And then I start to look at this, go, well, wait a minute. There's a lot of tech, clearly, but it's not like Johnson and Johnson is in that same boat, right? If the tech boat hits some rough waters, geez, maybe Berkshire Hathaway, maybe J&J or Walmart are not having those same things. And so for me, looking at this, it's really interesting to go, well, hang on a second. Maybe it's not quite what I thought it was, and wouldn't question it without seeing this chart.
Well, and another thing I would say is that let's take Amazon. We think of that as a tech stock, but actually I would, it's probably acts more like a retail stock now.
Yeah.
It probably acts a lot more like Walmart than it does like Facebook.
Right.
Because like it's lumped in because it was a tech innovator, but it's really just a conduit to sell stuff, not well, I suppose Facebook is that too, but
it's interesting with Amazon. And and this is not new information, but it just struck me that, when Amazon back in the 90s, when they started, that was a bookseller, right? It was, don't go to Borders or Barnes and Noble, but buy your books on Amazon. And so my kids are only 10, 11 years old. They don't think about Amazon as the bookstore anymore. Right? They have no sense for where it came from.
They put Barnes and Noble out of business.
Right. But as you said, as you kind of look from left to right on the chart here and how things have changed over time, that's another interesting point, is that there's changes in what companies are in what positions, right? But there's also changes in what these companies actually do and represent. Right. And how they work, Amazon, and that might be the same for Exxon and for IBM and some of the other ones, where the IBM of today might not look anything like the IBM from 1970 and when they were first doing payroll and some of those other things. Right. It's So lumping those things in when you say, hey, these companies are driving the market. So number one, my takeaway from looking at this chart is, yeah, they are, but it's in the last 20 or 30 years, it's higher than it has been, but it's not historically unknown. It's not crazy high and something to be super concerned about, like, oh my gosh, the market's broken, which is sort of the messaging I hear is the market's broken because these stocks are driving it. Well, no, we've been there before. We'll see what happens. It might repeat, it might not repeat itself, but that by itself doesn't mean it's broken. And then the other thing is that what these companies are, it's different than the old days when if you were a manufacturing company, you made cranes or cars, or you were AT&T and you did phone stuff, phone lines. That's just not how it is anymore. So some of that is, well, wait a minute, take some of those companies, and we just had the discussion, is Amazon a tech company? Is it a retail company? Maybe it's a finance company for all I know, as far as what goes on. And when you look at where their competition is, right, it's those lines have been blurred, and maybe it doesn't have the same impact it used to.
Seems like a great place to wrap up, John. So I am Bridget Sullivan Mermel, and I've got a fee-only financial planning practice in Chicago, Illinois.
And I'm John Shear. I've got a fee-only financial planning practice in Middleton, Wisconsin. Both Bridget and I are taking on new clients in our firms. We'd love to hear from you if you're interested in talking to us. And we're also both members of the Alliance of Comprehensive Planners, which is a group of nationwide fee-only holistic financial planners that think like we do. And if you're interested in finding a local planner in your area that has the same approach, you can check out acplanners.org.
And don't forget to subscribe.